Good afternoon, friends. Let's start with the intros.
She's 18 and legal. She's retarded.
Our forefathers weren't the pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. Pilgrim!
And we're live, waiting on the buddies to possibly join. This could be a return of the rabbit stream. Michigan Outpost. What's up, brother? Just chilling. I sprained my ankle a couple of days ago at work, so I'm off for the day. I might try to go for the damn 10-hour stream. There was an attempted coup in Bolivia 24 hours ago, so news is still coming out. Also, I don't know if y'all remember, there was an attempted coup in the Congo a couple of months ago where they found 3 Americans there. So I wonder if the CIA would be, or were a little bit more careful during this situation. Let's see what it's about. There's been all kinds of crazy ass trouble going on in all these third world countries and Africa and South America. Their governments have been very unstable. I'm surprised it hasn't. And we'll watch Myanmar is a place where it's gotten a little crazy at. We'll watch videos of that soon. But right now, I finish this. This is crazy. This is news to me as of 3 minutes ago. We had some shit going on in Peru last year. Yeah, well, I got a couple crazy ass news stories we're gonna go through. Before we get into the whole, I was talking about, so in Zimbabwe, I think the dedication of this episode, we're gonna get through the news as well, but the main point will be the goblin invasion of Zimbabwe. And now this is all connected. To me, in my opinion, I do not believe that's actual goblins. I believe that these people, Hutchin made a very good point the other day. I could also believe this as well, that they're already connected to such backwards practices that maybe agent saboteurs, CIA agents, they could hire people to go in there too, dress up as these little creatures, and the people think, oh, there's goblins. But here's a video of a supposed goblin capture. Then we're gonna watch a couple long videos, but we'll get into news here soon. And I got a video this guy had that gives a little bit more insight onto the goblin things as well. But this is a video of them saying that they caught a goblin.
Tshela amazwi lokho ngizitshela. Hayi amazwi ngizitshela ngasiwafuni thina.
And we are going to look at the comments of the video after this. This it's just empty buckets with towels. Empty buckets with towels. Maybe there's an international Ross, but I feel like these guys up here, they're getting money from all these people in the background. So these guys might be the tribal leaders of some sort, or there might be some kind of ecclesiastic shaman organization of some sort. And you notice all the people in the back, they look like they have all gone to a wholesale clothing department place. The Echo Unlimited, you're going to see a lot of Under Armour and a lot of Nike and Under Armour shirts. So if I'm not mistaken, he's saying we've got this goblin, he's in this bucket, we're banishing him now. These sacred soaked cloths are going to dissolve it into nothing. So that tells us a little bit about what's going on. All right. So that's some local. That is from 6 years ago. So they've been having this goblin problem for a while. There's been a war with the goblins. No, let me see. I don't think it's Minutes of Horror is the one I want to watch. I want to watch Metatron's. Yeah.
I think we all understand and know that goblins are real. I think we've determined that this is the case. Goblins are real. They live amongst us. This much is obvious. And what I wanted to look at today is the terrible news that goblins have been terrorizing Zimbabwe. And I feel very sorry for Zimbabwe, because no one, I think we all are familiar with goblins, right? No one wants to put up with this. This is a terrible and grave indiscretion. Also, we have a magazine. It does prepare you against goblin attack. Here is the glamorous assistant Stelios holding it up. Oh, I've taken it now. But he was holding it. Here it is, Islander. This guarantees 100% protection against goblins if you read it and imbibe its wisdom. So make sure to pre-order it, because on the 17th, I believe, it's going to go off of sale. So you've got to pre-order it before it releases. Otherwise, you will miss out from that 100% goblin guaranteed protection. So anyway, the reason I found out about this was actually something that Samson, our producer, put me onto. It was this story here. Police officers desert station citing goblin attacks. And this was published at the end of May, so not too long ago. And I'm going to read a little bit from it. It says,
I never thought that the shirt I wore to school one spring morning would lead to a federal lawsuit, but the reaction from the adults running my school didn't leave me with much choice. My school spends all of June expressing its view on LGBTQ+ issues, and school officials encourage us to wear our pride gear to celebrate Pride Month. Like my teachers and principal, I have beliefs too, and I'm not shy about sharing them.
We'll have to watch
I
Liam.
believe there are only two sexes, male and female, and I believe what
Hell
we call
yeah.
a person's gender, whether someone is man or woman, boy or girl, has everything to do with whether their sex is male or female. This view is backed up by science, and even though the administrators at my school would like me to think I'm alone in holding this view, I know I'm not. Many of my classmates agree. So, on that spring morning,
Let's go.
I wore a shirt that got right to the point.
Let's go.
There are only two genders. It was so first period when my principal pulled me out of class. I was told that people were complaining about the words on my shirt, that the words on my shirt might make some students feel unsafe. That's right, they admitted the possibility that some words on a shirt might make people feel unsafe was enough to
I'm gonna
silence
watch
my
a video on this
speech.
guy.
Speech on a topic that already floods the
He's
school.
based. He's cool.
Rather than respecting my right to free speech,
The new Kyle
officials
Rittenhouse.
chose to censor me twice.
2024, the Peru aliens, those 10-foot aliens, have just been
Trying to watch this video the other day. Gay. Yeah, we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to watch a video about that kid, seeing what's up with him, man, because that's kind of like they kicked him out of the school because he was wearing a shirt that said there are only two genders, and it made the other kids feel unsafe.
some wild times. And now we have even stranger things going on in South Africa. I have actually spoken about this location multiple times on my channel because of this massive blob, this massive anomaly that's seen over Bove Island in Antarctica that's making its way up the coast of South Africa. This anomaly, they say, is a glitch on Ventusky, but it has appeared on other weather applications. But every time it appears, there are some weird weather phenomena that has taken place in Africa. Very terrible heat waves appearing much earlier than they should be appearing. There are earthquakes, these very massive tornadoes that are not common to Africa, especially South Africa. So I have been busy connecting the dots between the massive mysterious blob on Bove Island and the weird weather anomalies that have been taking place. But now we have some even weirder stories coming out of South Africa, more specifically Zimbabwe, because apparently what is currently being reported is that police in Bulima, Zimbabwe have abandoned one of their primary headquarters following attacks by goblins. That is right, you heard that correctly. Police in Zimbabwe have abandoned their headquarters due to being overtaken by goblins. Back in, let's say 2022, I would have looked at this story and said to myself, this is something for the National Enquirer. Somebody is doing some kind of prank on the internet. This is not real. But given everything we've been through between 2023 to 2024, the Peru aliens, those 10-foot aliens that crashed in that family's backyard, aliens invading a Miami mall, aliens on a Brazilian hilltop, people seeing MFers on planes, a massive black hole appearing on an island in Antarctica, goblins taking over a police station in Zimbabwe is the least strangest story I think has come out so far. Now, according to city official Mabe Golani, Ward 2 councilor, the officers at Gwambe Station describe being harassed, bodies being violated, doors opening on their own, and things climbing on the roof, making it impossible to island in Antarctica owners. Because if not, other weird That's the police
They're,
being
all,
harassed.
they're on drugs. The CIA is pumping drugs into these people's villages and their drinking water and their fucking food supply. All right, and it's making them see these goblins. Same thing happened fucking in the Salem witch trials, all that shit. They were eating rye bread that had ergot fungus on it. Let's keep on watching this shit.
By these goblins. Are other people being harassed as well, like local?
It's all bullshit. The goblins aren't real. The fucking government, the CIA, the US government, maybe in conjunction with other governments, are pumping shit into these people's food to test it out on them. But we'll see what's going on. It's interesting to know what to see if something in the world going on right now.
Locals, residents, and store owners. Because if not, and it's only the police that are being targeted by these goblins and other weird events, then it definitely sounds like that somebody or something wants the police to leave this area. Since being terrorized, the police are so scared they actually have to patrol in pairs, and they describe these goblins to look like females. Now, there's not much else to this story, but I did want to see if I could look up a description of these goblins. The only thing I could find is that they're about 2 feet tall. Come to find out, Zimbabwe actually has a lengthy history where people are reporting they are being either attacked or harassed by goblins. I don't know if there's any connection between these goblin attacks, these goblins appearing, and the anomaly that's appearing on Beauvais Island. Like I once theorized is some kind of portal, but the anomaly is not something that just appeared in 2024. The anomaly goes years back, even as far back as 2021. A family from Zimbabwe claimed recently that they have been under siege by a troop of invisible goblins, reported earlier in March of 2024. The family, 3 children aged 13, 12, and 8, along with their elderly grandparents, said that the strange incidents have continuously escalated since they began last November and include unexplained noises in the walls, objects mysteriously vanishing, doors.
This has Agent Saboteur written all over it.
And when
they are pumping drugs into the food and drinking water of these communities and of these people and playing on to the superstitious minds they already have.
Windows moving on their own, lights flickering, food disappearing while it's cooking, and the children being physically assaulted by invisible forces. So it definitely sounds very similar as to what's taking place at the police station. Now, the family continues to say that we don't know what to do anymore. It all started last November. One morning, our children woke up with their heads shaved. We thought it was a one-time thing. The next day, our youngest child woke up in the middle of the night screaming. He had been stabbed in the leg with a knife. He also woke up with his head shaved again. We were all terrified and completely clueless about what's happening, said the children's grandmother. The children's grandmother stated that seeking spiritual assistance has reportedly brought no relief and that the phenomena only intensified. Isn't that something heard of in Abrahamic religions or demonology, that if a exorcism or a blessing goes wrong, it could actually worsen the situation? I have heard stories where a person would get their house blessed because of a haunting. The haunting would stop for a little while, and then out of nowhere, it would get even worse. She continues to state that we sought help from different prophets and churches, but the situation only worsened after each attempt. Doors and windows would come open inexplicably. Our children's clothes, especially their uniforms, would be torn, and they could no longer attend school. We hired a spiritual healer for a cleansing ceremony. The following day, the house mysteriously burned down, but only the bedrooms were affected. Everything in the kitchen and dining room was untouched. In an effort to protect the children, they were sent to stay with their maternal grandmother in South Africa. But the
that the dreaded journey. She cowers as she enters the doors, her fingers cupping each other, as if to reassure her exhausted self that the dreaded journey has finally come to an end. The glaring burden which she has carried for so long weighs down on her heavily, her spirit ready to share her story with anyone who is willing to listen. For a moment, she's dazed as she suddenly recalls why she's in this space. She did it again.
Meanwhile, Zimbabwe is seeing a pretty sharp upsurge in the drug use.
So Zimbabwe is the same country that is experiencing goblins. And after this, we're going to watch a Bove Island video.
Drug use among its population. Drug addicts say that crystal meth helps them forget about the stress of being unemployed. In a country with 90% unemployment rate, this is, of course, a big concern. Our next report gets you the details.
Crystal meth is a drug which has recently become more available and more widely used in Zimbabwe. It is cheaper than alcohol and ubiquitous.
Yeah.
You can find it anywhere, even in the midst
Biden
of
made
this
it legal.
pandemic. This 24-year-old
that is a lot
unemployed
more
agriculture graduate
legal.
started using the drug last year when the country was placed under a hard lockdown. And for him, that's when everything came to a standstill. The urge often leads the young man to improvise. Here he is seen dismantling a fluorescent light bulb, emptying a small sachet of methamphetamine into the tube. He says doing drugs is a way of healing the pain and stress of being unproductive.
When I smoke crystal meth, I get a lot of energy and I do not sleep at night. I feel like I'm just waking up when it's the middle of the night. And with all the energy, I can even do laundry in the middle of the night. I could even water the garden at that time. Anything is possible because of the amount of energy I get. I think if we were employed and occupied, it would help a lot. We wouldn't associate drugs with idle-minded people on the streets. Doing drugs is a way of healing the pain and stress of being unproductive and not getting the opportunity to proceed with education.
The crisis has hit mostly highly populated and impoverished suburbs. Children as young as 14 and still going to school are taking drugs. Psychiatrists say the drug is relatively new in Zimbabwe. It is dangerously affordable at just only $3 for a sachet. The police believes the drugs are being smuggled from across borders. Half of Zimbabwe's population, around 8 million people, live in extreme poverty. There has been an alarming rise in substance abuse, particularly during the lockdown. Crystal meth use is adding to a cocktail of woes accompanying the COVID pandemic. Economic hardship, unemployment, poverty, and desperation. At public hospitals, around 65% of psychiatric admissions are linked to drug abuse.
There is a need for self-help projects that generates income for the youth and projects for the youth. That can be assisted on my view by the government to intervene and help create employment.
Anti-drug campaigners are trying to educate affected communities, while psychiatrists warn that drug use will increase mental health issues. Hospitals are buckling under the strain of crystal meth addicted patients. Fears are growing that addiction to meth could be the country's newest epidemic. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
Sorry, guys, I had to go check on something. What's up, Morgan? Yeah, so in Zimbabwe, they're on $3 meth. So here's Bove Island, where that mysterious cloud is forming off of.
Have you ever thought about where the most isolated place in the world is located? Away from the noise and people? There is an island situated between Antarctica and South Africa that is considered to be the most isolated place on Earth, and it's called Bouvet Island. Why is this island unoccupied? And what is the mystery that surrounds it? Learn more about the compelling true tale of Bouvet Island in this episode of the Faith and Mystery Files. On January 1st, 1739, a French navigator, Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet, discovered an island around 1,000 miles away from Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. Bouvet and his crew had been sailing for days to explore the southern seas. However, around December 10th, 1738, they realized they were immensely off course. There had been a great density of fog around them, yet the men continued in hopes of finding an island to recuperate from the journey thus far. They were able to catch glimpses of icebergs and native wildlife. But the further they journeyed, the further they found themselves off course. So much so that they were estimated to be about 1,600 miles from any land at all. That is when Bouvet and the crew decided to start heading back. As the men were continuing to grow weary, they soon spotted something that lifted their spirits. On January 1st, 1739, the crew saw land. Bouvet stated that a very high land covered with snow which appeared through the midst was spotted by his men.
Someone is killing Jedi. It doesn't make sense. There's no method, no pattern. Who's next?
Here's that new fucking gay ass liberal fucking dumbass fucking Star Wars shit where there are no fucking white men that are good guys in it. And if you know anything about Star Wars and this new Star Wars, not that it matters because all this shit is fantasy and fake shit anyway, but they can't have, a regular person can't have nothing nowadays. But Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, is the only person that's been born of the Force. He's like the chosen one. But this chick in the show is like supposed to be even greater and more badass of a chosen one. But let's get over here to this.
To access the land. He thought this island was part of Antarctica and promptly named it Cape of Circumcision, or Cap de la Circoncisión. For 12 days, the crew made attempts to dock and explore the land. However, they found it difficult to safely make it closer to the island. The men began to contract scurvy and ultimately decided to leave to head back to the nearest port in hopes of gathering new supplies and medical assistance. Yet the trip was not completely lost. Bouvet documented various new animals that they saw, including penguins, and described them as the following: amphibious creatures that look like large ducks, but have fins instead of wings. When the news of Bouvet's discovery was published, several were determined to look for the island as well. They even began referring to it as Bouvet Island. Captain James Cook and James Clark Ross were among those who searched for the area, yet no one could locate it. Some say that this was because the island had not been correctly charted on maps available at the time. Was Bouvet Island ever reached again? There were numerous attempts made throughout the late 1700s to get to Bouvet Island, but none were successful in finding the area. It wasn't until 1808 that Captain James Lindsay and his crew, the Samuel Enderley and Sons Company, with the shipping vessel Snow Swan, located the island. They were able to properly identify and correct its coordinates. However, they were unable to land on the island due to the weather conditions and icebergs surrounding it. But Captain Lindsay did try to rename the area Lindsay Island. However, the name did not stick. Others also tried to claim the land, yet no one could safely get to it. One of the most notable accounts was Lars Christensen's 1927 expedition with the shipping vessel Norvegia. The expedition was to research krill and conduct oceanographic studies. When the crew spotted the island, they were able to dock and walk on the icy and rocky terrain. Christensen had it claimed for Norway and set up the Norwegian flag in December 1927. Yet there was a dispute between Britain.
You would think that Norway would be really far from South Africa, right? But I guess from you can't see my finger pointing at the screen, but from that if you don't know geography well, Norway is over here, then South Africa is obviously down here. So boom, bada bing. Obviously, we'll get into the whole flat. We'll get into the whole why it's flat here in a second. This is pushing even more of a flat narrative. Shout out to
Britain and
the guy that's doing this video.
Norway as to who had the rights to the land. After about 3 years, Bouvet Island was awarded to Norway and officially became a part of the Norwegian territory. What is the mystery behind this island? There are quite a few unusual things about Bouvet Island. First, we should look at the terrain. The island completely consists of ice and rocky ground. It is approximately 19 square miles in total. The weather tends to be extremely cold, with the warmest temperature being in February at around 2 degrees Celsius, or 35.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Bouvet Island is also home to around 50,000 penguins, which include various breeds, such as the macaroni penguin, the chinstrap penguin, and the Adelie penguin. Birds, such as the albatross and the southern fulmar, as well as the Antarctica fur seals and southern elephant seals, all dwell there peacefully. Another unique fact of the island is that it has an active volcano. In the 1950s, scientists determined that the island grew due to lava that erupted from the volcano Mount Olav. It even has a summit elevation of 1,950 meters. But one of the most surprising aspects or incidents that occurred on the island is the discovery made in 1964. On April 2nd, 1964, the HMS Protector was sent to Bouvet Island to locate a new area that had been formed by lava. The island was well known by many to be difficult to get to, which was one of the main reasons it was considered uninhabited by humans. Yet the crew soon came to a peculiar sight. In the lagoon area, near a part of the island that was easier to access, they found an abandoned rowboat. To get a better view of the island, Lieutenant Commander Alan Crawford and several of the crew took a helicopter to scout out the land. However, a few minutes into the search, they found an abandoned boat. It had no markings or etchings to show where it had come from. Many thought it looked to be that of a lifeboat. Strangely, they found the oars on the shore near a copper tank that had been flattened and a barrel. Due to the intense weather conditions, the commander wasn't able to do a complete search. Yet he noted that no remains of any human living on the island had been found. Bouvet Island wasn't visited again until 2 years later. However, the boat was nowhere to be seen. What happened to the boat? Why were no survivors ever found? There are a few theories as to the mystery of the rowboat. Some think that the boat sank in the lagoon due to rough weather conditions. Others say it could have gone back out to sea. Those are probable outcomes, but how did the boat make it to the island in the first place? There is an incident said to have happened in 1958 that could explain why a boat was in the lagoon. However, it still leaves a few questions unanswered. On October 22, 1958, a crew from Slavia, a Russian naval ship, is said to have been sailing near Bouvet Island. A few of the men decided to row to the island from one of the lifeboats and explore the area. However, once they were finished and ready to return to the ship, they soon realized they couldn't. The fog and the surrounding icebergs made it impossible to leave. They ended up staying there for 3 days until a helicopter picked them up. It is possible that this was the case of how the boat ended up in the lagoon. However, why would the boat remain intact for 7 years, but be missing only 2 years after it was spotted? And if the men stayed there for 3 days, why was no evidence found of anyone being there? Also, if the warmest temperature on the island is about 2 degrees Celsius, why wouldn't the boat be used to construct a shelter as they waited to be rescued? Does this account explain why the rowboat was there? Or could there be something more to the story? What do you think? Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Faith and Mystery Files. Let us know your thoughts about the rowboat and Bouvet Island in the comments below. If you want to hear more true, intriguing mysteries, check out our previous episodes. Thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and commenting on our videos. It makes a big difference. Thank you again.
Am I going to live stream the presidential debate at 9? You're fucking damn right I am, Michigan. And I ask you kindly, please come back and watch whenever I am, alright? It's gonna be dope. You know how when the buddy's on, it might be solo, might just be us. So, yeah. I didn't know it was tonight at 9. So, even if I have to, I'm sure I can find it on X if they're not going to show it on YouTube. Thanks for reminding me and getting me. I believe that portals do exist. I don't believe that they are necessarily always if life does exist beyond our own. If life does exist beyond our own, it would be from another dimension, another plane of existence. So we'd be on it'd be from another plane. So I believe for the portal, it wouldn't necessarily be physical beings coming over. I think it could be mental and spiritual beings finding themselves over here. Let's see where we go. I'm eating right now. I'm eating at home.
Mellow mushroom tastes great in our pizza joints. Oh.
Pro-life,
And Scandinavian wild blueberry sandwich.
protesters on the steps of the Supreme Court, letting the justices know they're not happy with the court's decision to throw out a case that pitted a federal law to perform emergency.
Oh, gross. Look how ugly and disgusting all these chicks are. Let's just
that we don't want to give health care to women. That is not true.
In a one-sentence statement, the court dismissed the case. We got a sneak peek Wednesday when a draft opinion was mistakenly posted briefly on the court's website. Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote, "Too many aspects of the case have changed and rendered the scope of the dispute unclear at best."
It's hard to feign surprise with the fact that this opinion came out last night by mistake. It was the ultimate off-ramp.
Some hospitals in Idaho were sending women with pregnancy complications out of state because some doctors fear they'll face criminal charges if they perform an abortion in the wake of the state's near-total ban after 6 weeks. The Biden administration argued federal law requires doctors to give stabilizing treatment in medical emergencies, including abortions. And Democrats in Congress say they'll do their part.
We will not rest until reproductive freedom is the law of the land for every single woman.
Okay, so I agree that in that situation, yes, I do agree that a woman has a right to an abortion if they're about to die. But I don't know. It shouldn't be. It's a little more complicated than that, but I don't believe that a woman should go out and have sex much times, fucking get some load squirted in her a few times too many, and then get an abortion every time, as form of birth control. No, I don't believe that. She should just have her I don't know.
To make the abortion issue front and center at tonight's debate, but there's also another Supreme Court decision looming that could change the course of this election. Whether former President Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for actions he took while in office. That ruling could come out Friday.
It's going to be a heck of a day. It's basically Roberts has decided to hold the World Cup, World Series, and the Super Bowl.
We're still waiting on decisions in several cases, and there's no rhyme or reason why some rulings come out before others. The Chief Justice simply says the decisions come out once they're finalized. From the Supreme Court, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Yes, a big topic indeed. We do want to give you a live look right now in Atlanta. President Biden making looks like to be a surprise visit there on his way to the presidential debate. And you can see a lot of Secret Service as well as people wanting to greet the president. And we'll be continuing to give you updates as we get closer to the debate. We'll take another 2-minute break. Stay right here with us. More to come on Live Now.
I heard that some people, they might be taking some channels down. They might be taking videos down of the debate.
as we delve into one of the most perplexing medical and social enigmas of the 20th century. Nestled along the banks of the Rhone River, the tranquil French village of Pont-Saint-Esprit.
Kind of going back to the whole drug-induced towns that the CIA has done. They've been doing it for a long time, 1951. CIA, that's just another new name for one of the many tentacles of the deep state. The deep state's like an octopus. Its hands, its arms spread. So many different things.
Is famed not only for its picturesque landscapes, but also for being the epicenter of an extraordinary and terrifying event. In today's episode, we set the stage for a story that combines elements of horror, intrigue, and enduring mystery. Join us as we uncover the layers of the 1951 Pont-Saint-Esprit mass poisoning, starting with a glimpse into the town's charm and its sudden descent into chaos.
I just want to say real quick, if you guys are wondering what the W energy code thing down there represents, go to w.com, see something you like, grab it, throw in my code X1620, and you'll get 10% off your order. And W is good, tastes good as fuck too. I like to mix it with carbonated water.
Before the chaos of 1951, Pont-Saint-Esprit was a model of provincial tranquility, encapsulating the serene lifestyle of southern France. In this scene, we take a closer look at the daily life of its inhabitants, where ancient stone bridges span azure waters and narrow cobblestone streets echo with the footsteps of history. Markets brimming with local produce, such as fragrant lavender and ripe olives, paint a picture of a community deeply connected to its land and traditions. The Spiripontains, as the locals are called, were known for their close-knit relationships, often gathering in cafes to exchange news over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine from nearby vineyards. This idyllic setting, however, was soon to be overshadowed by an event that would mark the town in the annals of medical and social mysteries. In the heart of Pont-Saint-Esprit, just days before the crisis, life unfolded with a gentle predictability. We see the Spiripontains going about their day unbeknownst to them. Their serene existence was on the cusp of descending into chaos. As the sun...
We're just kind of deep diving through agent provocateur history, a little bit of current news. Gonna be going to the debate tonight. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
Sets over Pont-Saint-Esprit. The town story is about to take a dark and bewildering turn, setting the stage for one of the most perplexing medical mysteries of the 20th century. Subtle signs began to surface, foretelling the crisis that would engulf this tranquil town. Farmers noted blighted crops, their fields less fruitful despite good weather. In the bakery, the flour appeared normal, but bakers sensed the dough was off, though they couldn't identify the cause. Doctors saw a rise in mild digestive issues and insomnia, subtle symptoms that hinted at the impending chaos. As night fell, these disturbances were overlooked, dismissed as natural quirks or minor health complaints.
Yeah, hopefully
these were the early warnings,
we don't get it
the quiet
down
before the storm that would soon
I
shake
heard channels
Pont-Saint-Esprit to its core.
I've heard channels would be getting taken down because of the debate, or not channels, but the videos.
As dawn broke over Pont-Saint-Esprit, shops opened their doors for the day's business. Yet amidst this ordinary backdrop, the bakery's latest batch of bread was being prepared with the same flour that had subtly troubled the bakers the previous day. Unbeknownst to them, this batch was different, destined to alter the fate of the entire town. Conversations at the local cafe would soon become frantic discussions of disbelief and fear. This day serves as a poignant reminder of how swiftly life can be disrupted by the unseen forces lurking within the mundane. As the sun set, the town settled into the deceptive calm of the evening. Families gathered around dinner tables, enjoying the bread from the day's bake, unaware of the lurking danger. As night deepened, a subtle change began to ripple through the households. People reported feeling uneasy, a growing restlessness that they chalked up to the summer heat, or perhaps minor indigestion. But this was no ordinary discomfort. Across the town, individuals tossed and turned in their beds, plagued by unsettling dreams and a mounting sense of dread. The local doctor received the first of many calls just past midnight from a family bewildered by their symptoms of nausea and anxiety. Little did they know these were merely the harbingers of the chaos that would soon engulf their community. Imagine waking up to a typical morning in a quiet town, only to find it transformed into a scene of horror and madness. In August 1951, the usually peaceful Pont Saint-Esprit suddenly became a tableau of suffering. Over 250 townspeople were struck by terrifying hallucinations and inexplicable madness. Some saw their hearts escaping. Others felt snakes twisting in their bellies. The town was engulfed in a wave of psychological torment and physical agony that led to at least 7 deaths. Initial investigations focused on bread from the local bakery, suspected of being contaminated. Tests revealed that the flour used might have been tainted with ergot, a fungus known to cause hallucinations and convulsions. This led many to believe that ergotism, also known as St. Anthony's fire, was responsible for the mass poisoning. As the years passed, other theories surfaced, including the possibility of an experimental psychedelic drug accidentally or intentionally dispersed over the village, and even Cold War-era biological testing by the CIA. These theories point to darker, more sinister explanations, questioning whether there was more to the tragedy than a simple case of food poisoning. Today, Pont Saint-Esprit has recovered from that terrifying summer. The streets are calm, and the scars have faded, but the memories and mysteries linger. What really happened in this quaint village in 1951 remains partially unresolved, leaving us to ponder on the potent mix of fact and speculation surrounding the case. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's most bizarre medical mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell.
Yeah, this guy, he's cool. What's his channel again? Yeah, Epic Legends Unfold. Fuck yeah, 107. Y'all go and subscribe to this guy. What? Let's go ahead and say it. What? Let's check out what Epic Legends has going on. Damn, how the fuck does this dude not got how the fuck?
In the heart of Africa's political landscape lurks a name, shrouded in...
The Hatfields and McCoys, two of the Smoky Mountains' most notorious families.
Imagine discovering a mysterious artifact
Okay.
in the states.
Okay, is it this guy? Is it? I don't know if it's him or if this is AI now. But still, that's some good content. There might be 2 guys. They're from Sweden. Now we're gonna just delve more into the CIA connection. Strained soup. They got strange soup.
Throughout the years, there have been numerous unethical experiments and human rights violations committed by the CIA, including things like inhumane interrogation tactics and subjecting people to diseases against their will. In this video, I'll be talking about an incident that some have claimed is yet another CIA experiment carried out on unwilling participants. Let's get into the story of the mass poisoning of Pont Saint-Esprit and some of the theories behind why it occurred. Starting on August 15th of 1951, hundreds of people in the small town of Pont Saint-Esprit in France suddenly fell ill over the course of several days. They experienced symptoms in 4 stages. In the initial stage, people reported symptoms like depressive moods, agitation, and slight anguish. Within a few hours, they started to have digestive disturbances and nausea.
No.
They also experienced issues with their autonomic.
How would y'all feel if this was happening to you in your home? You woke up and you're just feeling crazy. You saw your kids and wife, they're just going insane. Your neighbors were bucking water and they're damn pouring water. Like, fucking imagine seeing your neighbor with the water hose going inside this water in his mailbox. You know what I'm saying? Something of those lines. So how would you feel?
Autonomic nervous system, like feeling flashes of cold and hot intermittently. As the illness progressed, they started to develop insomnia, which lasted for days in some people. In an extreme case, one man reported spending 21 days without sleep. Their digestive issues got worse and became extremely painful. In addition, they started to sweat a lot and had what was described as a disagreeable odor. Some residents experienced bizarre delusions and hallucinations, many involving fire, snakes, and monsters. A man named Gabriel Valadaire repeatedly shouted, "I'm dead, my head is made of copper, and I have snakes in my stomach," at his roommates. A little girl thought she was being chased and attacked by tigers. A postman named Leon Armunier was suddenly overcome by nausea and hallucinations when delivering mail, causing him to fall off his bike. These hallucinations got so bad that he ended up being straitjacketed in the hospital. The symptoms of the illness were so severe that Leon has said that he'd prefer to die rather than go through that again. Some of these delusions ended up resulting in violence and serious injuries. One 11-year-old boy tried to strangle his mother. An elderly woman threw herself against the wall hard enough to break 3 ribs. A man shouted that he was an airplane before jumping from the second story of a hospital. This caused him to break both of his legs, but he continued to try and run for several meters before staff could catch up with him. Describing the incident, a French newspaper reported, "It is neither Shakespeare nor Edgar Allan Poe. It is, alas, the sad reality all around Pont Saint-Esprit and its environs, where terrifying scenes of hallucinations are taking place. They are scenes straight out of the Middle Ages, scenes of horror and pathos, full of sinister shadows. The mass sickness ended up affecting over 250 people. 50 were admitted to asylums, and 7 ultimately passed away due to the effects of the illness." It didn't take long for doctors at the time to come to a conclusion about what caused this mass illness. The article, "Ergot Poisoning at Pont Saint-Esprit," states that the sickness was due to poisoning from people consuming bread from a local bakery that had been contaminated with ergot fungus. The bread was said to have come from Brienne's bakery, and there are inconsistent reports of what the bread was like, with some saying that it looked and smelled normal, and others claiming that it was gray and smelled like gasoline or bleach. To give you a little background on ergot poisoning, let me describe the usual symptoms. There's 2 categories, convulsive symptoms and gangrenous symptoms. The convulsive symptoms involve spasms and seizures, headaches, psychosis or mania, and abdominal pain and vomiting. The nervous system is generally affected prior to the gastrointestinal effects. The gangrenous symptoms, which are caused by vasoconstriction, include skin peeling, a loss of sensation, and edema. If left untreated, the affected tissues will die. These symptoms align pretty well with what the people of Pont Saint-Esprit experienced. Ergot has actually been reported to be a cause of poisoning at quite a few points in history. The first case that I was able to find was that of the Grobal man, a bog body that dates back to 3rd century BC. While his death was most likely caused by his throat being slit for a ritual killing, analysis of his body also showed that prior to death he consumed a porridge that contained enough ergot to make him extremely delirious, and even possibly put him in a coma. It's also been suggested that ergot poisoning may have been to blame for the Salem witch trials. The mind-altering effects and convulsions may have been attributed to a person being a witch or possessed, when in reality they just ate grains that were contaminated. This has been contested by some scholars, but I thought it was an interesting theory to mention here. Ergot poisoning stopped being a serious issue in the 1800s in many countries, and by the 20th century it was very uncommon. The most recent reported case in France prior to what happened in Pont Saint-Esprit
How many times throughout history do you think some stuff like that has happened?
was in the 1700s. However, there have been outbreaks of ergot poisoning in some countries as recently as 2001 in Ethiopia, so it's not entirely implausible that this happened in 1953. The dose of ergot that's necessary to cause poisoning can be tiny. It only takes a minuscule quantity of ergot to cause sickness in a relatively large group of people. The doctors studying the incident in Pont Saint-Esprit believed that there was a large amount of poison in the bread, because people only had to eat a small amount to get very sick. Animals who were fed this bread began to convulse and die shortly afterwards, so the effects weren't restricted to humans. Prior to the mass illness at Pont Saint-Esprit, several nearby villages also reported bread-related outbreaks of food poisoning. None of these were anywhere near as widespread or as serious. However, in 2009, the ergot poisoning explanation was challenged after an American journalist named Hank Albarelli claimed to possess a CIA document that shone new light on the incident. The document was labeled R.E. Pont-Saint-Esprit and F. Olson files, SO Span France Operation File Inclusive Olson, Intel Files, and carried a Bellin. Tell him to see to it that these are buried. The F. Olson here refers to a man named Frank Olson. I'm going to give a fairly detailed rundown of who he is, just to give some context on why this might be related to Pont-Saint-Esprit. Frank was a bacteriologist and was employed as a biological warfare scientist at the United States Army's Biological Warfare Laboratories. In 1943, he was working at Fort Detrick, and his experiments focused heavily on the use of aerosolized anthrax. It was around this time that Frank began working for the CIA. In 1952, he began working on Project Artichoke. This project utilized methods like hypnosis, LSD, and forced addiction to morphine in an attempt to answer the question, can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against fundamental laws of nature such as self-preservation? The core objective was
Yeah, it was. Yes. LSD. Now the guy, his name is Albert Hoffman. He was working on headache medicine, supposedly. And now the more I think about it, the more I think it was a controlled. It was a way for them to create a drug they could mass produce to affect the generations that came after the youth. You know, everybody that was born during that time would, you know, a lot of them be tripping on acid, and a lot of generations after that did too.
to see what kind of mind control could be used to get a person to involuntarily attempt to assassinate someone. Project Artichoke was the precursor of Project MK-Ultra, which started in 1953. About a year after Frank began working on Project Artichoke, in February of 1953, serious allegations of biological warfare during the Korean War were made by several captured American prisoners of war. These claims involved the United States dropping germ bombs on civilians all across North Korea. These bombs supposedly contained things like shellfish, feathers, and insects that were all contaminated with diseases like anthrax and the bubonic plague. The US government denied that there were any truth to these claims and said that it was nothing more than propaganda. They also threatened to charge the prisoners of war who made these allegations with treason. When they were eventually released, the prisoners rescinded their accusations and claimed that they were forced to lie by their captors who tortured them. Around the summer of 1953, Frank's job required him to travel to several places in Europe, including Paris and Berlin. When he returned home, his family noticed that he was behaving very differently and was often in a bad mood. His coworker later said that Frank was a witness of interrogations in Europe where he claimed to have seen people be killed, and this upset him greatly. He became certain that the claims that the US was using biological weapons during the war were true. At some point, while he was in the UK, Frank was in contact with a psychiatrist with high-level security clearances named William Sargent. After the two met up, William allegedly reported that Frank was now a security risk. He also recommended that Frank's access to military facilities should be limited. A few months later, in November of 1953, a retreat was scheduled at Deep Creek Lake for 11 participants. Some were military personnel who worked at Fort Detrick, and others were involved with the CIA. Frank was one of these 11 people. During the retreat on the 19th of November, all but 2 of the participants would be sitting together and drinking. Unbeknownst to them, the liquor had been drugged with LSD by Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the MK-Ultra project. No one seemed to notice any effects until about 20 minutes later, when Sidney revealed what he'd done. From that point on, some of the men spent their night laughing and loudly conversing with each other. However, others didn't enjoy the experience at all. One of the unwilling participants said that
Would you be pissed or would you be having a good time, guys? I feel like personally, me now, at this point in my life, I'd be pissed. I feel like a lot of these guys were probably in their 30s and 40s, older 50s, you know, and that was an unexpected experience. We're there drinking, having a good time already.
it was the most frightening experience he'd ever had. Frank was described as being psychotic, confused, and paranoid. As the night dragged on, he and several others were unable to fall asleep due to discomfort from the effects of the LSD. By the time the morning came around and everyone regrouped, most of them were agitated and just wanted to go home. Frank ended up returning to his house around dinner time, sullen and silent about what went on at the retreat. His wife tried to ask him about the trip, but he didn't say much for most of the evening. This went on until bedtime, when he said that he made a terrible mistake and that he felt humiliated because the others had laughed at him. He didn't elaborate on this or say anything else about what transpired during the retreat. Shortly afterwards, Frank arrived at his boss's office early in the morning. He seemed agitated and said that he wanted to either be fired or quit his job. After his boss assured him that his behavior at the retreat was beyond reproach, Frank decided not to terminate his employment. He continued to fulfill his duties for the rest of the day. However, within about a day or so, he returned, claiming that he felt too incompetent and that he wanted to quit. His boss thought Frank seemed disturbed and was in need of psychiatric attention, so he alerted Sidney Gottlieb's deputy, Robert Lashbrook. Sidney and Robert decided to send Frank to Dr. Harold Abramson, who was in fact not a psychiatrist but rather an allergist and immunologist who was actually involved in the CIA's work with LSD. Dr. Abramson was located in New York, so Frank and Robert traveled there together and stayed in a hotel room. This trip ultimately didn't prove very helpful for Frank. While he had occasional improvements, he would sink deeper into feelings of incompetence, depression, and paranoia. Eventually, things got bad enough that Frank was afraid to see his family because he worried that he would lose control and hurt his children. He agreed to be admitted to Chestnut Lodge, a sanitarium that was staffed by several psychiatrists with CIA clearance. His flight there was booked for the next day, and Frank called his wife for the first time in about a week. They had a pleasant conversation that helped ease her worries about him. Unfortunately, Frank never ended up catching that flight.
Your wish is my command, Ice Queen.
Sometimes your voice is necessary.
Yes.
At around 2 a.m. that morning, he ran straight through the closed blinds and window where he fell to his death from his 10th story
Classic modern day commercial.
room. This was 9 days after he was unknowingly dosed with LSD at the retreat. Frank Olson's official cause of death was ruled as a suicide. However, there is some evidence that suggests it may have actually been a homicide. A second autopsy of Frank's body in 1994 determined that he had a large hematoma on the left side of his head and a chest injury that were likely to have occurred before his fall. James Stars, a professor of law and forensic science and one member of the team who performed the autopsy, said that this evidence was frankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. Speculations have been made that Frank was deliberately killed because he posed a security risk and that the story of him crashing through the window was a cover-up. However, no murder charges were laid. Frank's family received a settlement of $750,000 US and an apology from President Gerald Ford and the CIA director at the time, William Colby. If you're interested in finding out more information on Frank Olson, I'd recommend checking out the Netflix documentary series Wormwood by Errol Morris, who you might remember from my Nub City video. So, back to Hank's document. The label on the document that Hank brought attention to also brings another person into this. It says that it's to be handed to Bellin, who is then in charge of burying it. Bellin here refers to a man named David Bellin. I won't dive too deeply into his life and career other than mentioning one point that I think is relevant here. David was the executive director of the Rockefeller Commission. This committee was set up to investigate illegal activities carried out by the CIA, and their report was published in 1975 publicizing the experiments conducted by those involved with MKUltra. There's a page in this document that mentions both Frank Olson and Pont Saint-Esprit. In July of 1975, a New York Times article reported that unnamed staff within the Rockefeller Commission revealed that Sidney Gottlieb was to blame for covertly dosing Frank Olson with LSD. The article also states that Sidney ordered 152 files related to the LSD experiments to be destroyed in 1973. So, now that we know who Frank Olson and David Bellin are, let's get back to the claims made by Hank Albarelli. What exactly does Hank think that the connection between Pont Saint-Esprit, David Bellin, and Frank Olson is? He claims that it's LSD and CIA involvement. Hank believes that the Pont Saint-Esprit files mentioned in the document were supposed to be buried because they showed that the CIA was experimenting on the townspeople with LSD, just like what had been done to Frank. The files needed to be destroyed to cover their tracks. Hank agrees that the bread was likely the source of the poisoning. However, he believes that it wasn't ergot, but rather LSD that made the townspeople so sick in 1951. He claims to have gotten a hold of another top-secret report that was issued in 1949 by the research director of the Edgewood Arsenal human experiments. Many of the experiments carried out at the Edgewood Arsenal facility were related to LSD and other mind-altering drugs. Hank alleges that the report said that the U.S. Army should do anything possible to start experimenting with LSD. Hank also used Freedom of Information legislation to get his hands on another CIA report, this time dated from 1954. The reporting agent outlines a conversation with a representative from the Sandoz Chemical Company located in Switzerland, a few hundred kilometers from Pont-Saint-Esprit. It was the only place that was manufacturing LSD at the time. According to Hank, the agent reported that the Sandoz representative, who had consumed several drinks at this point, blurted out, "The Pont-Saint-Esprit secret was that it was not the bread at all. For weeks, the French tied up our laboratories with analyses of bread. It was not the grain ergot." The agent then followed up by asking, if the material wasn't in the bread, then how did it get into the people? To which the representative replied that it was an experiment. Hank has also claimed that a U.S. Department of Justice website also implicates Sandoz in being involved in chemical warfare. He quotes the website as saying, "The Sandoz Chemical Company went as far as promoting LSD as a potential secret chemical warfare weapon to the U.S. government. Their main selling point in this was that a small amount in a main water supply or
Besides them infecting the drugs in Zimbabwe, I'm convinced that back in 2020 during the whole George Floyd COVID epidemic, they were like flooding all the weed and everything with some kind of drugs that altered our minds at that time.
sprayed in the air could disorient and turn
Like a weird fentanyl kind of deal.
psychotic an entire company of soldiers, leaving them harmless and unable to fight. I couldn't find this website myself or anyone else referencing this, so I can't really speak to whether or not this is true." Hank has also claimed that 2 former researchers working for the CIA disclosed to him that the village of Pont-Saint-Esprit was initially subject to an air blitz of LSD. However, this ended up being ineffective, so the CIA decided to contaminate the local food supply so they'd be forced to ingest it, leading to the mass poisoning. Hank alleges that he was told by a former Special Operations Division scientist that the CIA were not entirely satisfied with the results at Pont-Saint-Esprit. He quotes the scientist as saying, "The overall results of the experiment in southern France were good, but there was also an adverse effect, or what would now be called a black swan reaction. That several people died was unexpected, completely unexpected. It wasn't supposed to turn out that way, so it was back to the drawing boards." Be mindful that Hank doesn't really show many of the documents that his claims are based on. The majority of his claims come from sources that can't be named, so most of the proof we have is just his word. And Hank's LSD theory has certainly been contested. Professor Stephen Kaplan, an expert on the history of French foods and an author of a book on this incident, thinks that the claims about LSD are nonsense. He said, "I have numerous objections to this paltry evidence against the CIA. First of all, it's clinically incoherent. LSD takes effects in just a few hours, whereas the inhabitants showed symptoms only after 36 hours or more. Furthermore, LSD does not cause the digestive ailments or the vegetative effects described by the townspeople. According to drugrehab.com, the effects of an LSD overdose, also known as a bad trip, include panic attacks, intense anxiety, terrifying thoughts, delusions, paranoia, rapid mood swings, psychotic episodes, and seizures. The physical effects can include increased heart rate and blood pressure, muscle twitches and shaking, dilated pupils, sweating, sleeplessness, and loss of appetite. Many of these symptoms were prevalent at the Pont-Saint-Esprit poisoning, but like Professor Kaplan says, there isn't really any evidence that LSD would cause the digestive issues that the townspeople experienced. Interestingly, a minute dose of LSD can cause death in animals, which does align with the incident in Pont-Saint-Esprit. Professor Kaplan has further condemned the idea that the CIA was behind the poisoning by saying, "It is absurd, this idea of transmitting a very toxic drug by putting it in bread." He said that the LSD would not have survived the high temperature of the oven when the bread is being baked, and thus would have been completely ineffective. Hank contests to this point by saying that the LSD could have been added after. Professor Kaplan has also disagreed with Hank's claim that the CIA originally tried to distribute the LSD via an air blitz, saying that the technology to do so wasn't even available at the time. Professor Kaplan's own theory on the source of the poisoning was that it may have been caused by the use of nitrogen trichloride, a substance that would artificially bleach flour. Nitrogen trichloride is also known as agene, and the use of it as a bleaching agent for flour was banned in 1949 because it caused severe neurological disorders in humans as well as in dogs. While there's no definitive proof that the CIA was the real culprit of the poisoning in Pont-Saint-Esprit, I'd like to delve a little deeper into the connection between ergot and LSD. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, LSD, also called D-lysergic acid diethylamide, is one of the most powerful mind-altering chemicals.
Shut up, bitch. So, Biden pardons those convicted of gay sex under old military laws. Some 2,000 people are thought to have been convicted under laws that banned sodomy and attempted sodomy in the military from 1951 to 2013. The Biden administration announced Wednesday It was pardoning potentially thousands of U.S. veterans who were convicted under old military rules that prohibited gay sex. All right, so if you were convicted of gay sex, kicked out for sodomy in the military, Biden's got your back. All right, now why would the DEA intentionally flood communities with drugs? All right, last week, this is a news article from 2017. Last week, the acting director of the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration was asked whether his agents ever intentionally allow drug shipments into communities in the interest of making a bigger bust later on. Chuck Rosenberg's answer: I'll have to check and get back to you on that. Rosenberg was addressing the House Judiciary Committee at a hearing on oversight of the DEA and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. During the hearing, Louisiana Democratic Representative Cedric L. Richmond asked about the practice. Here's the full exchange. Richmond, this committee held many hearings and was furious about the Fast and Furious program, at least from my knowledge, DEA and other drug agencies, oftentimes part of a bigger sting and is letting transactions and other things go through. Now it's a very specific question. In DEA's past, present, future, any times do you let drugs hit communities to get the bigger fish? We're not supposed to, sir. No, Rosenberg replied. Richmond says, okay, are you aware of any instances where it may happen? Then Rosenberg says, I'll have to check and get back to you on that. Rosenberg's demurral was entirely surprising. So he doesn't deny, but he didn't confirm. Guys, they're actively out here trying to kill us, trying to slaughter us, trying to demoralize us. Thank you to the 3 people that's watching, the 1 person left. We are going to be back around 9 for the debate, so come back and check that out. Until then, peace. Thank you for watching.